I remember Kaylin coming home in tears several times. And I think the worst part is when another girl who she thought was in her friend group would scare her because she would follow her or sneak up behind her in the hallway or at her locker and kind of whisper some mean things.
She wanted to push me away and get me out of the picture, and she would physically and verbally do that, like pushing me to the side or calling me names when we were alone, telling me what to do, telling me what not to do. It got worse when that friend made a new friend who didn't like that I was already best friends with her. So every time that the three of us were then together, she would try to show off that they were best friends and then kind of push me into being the third wheel, which obviously didn't feel good. Therefore, both of the girls were controlling me in a way, which is why I felt stuck and scared. Due to the pressure in middle school of trying to be a certain way, look a certain way, I remember her pressuring me to always be lower status than her, making me feel insecure and bad about myself. It was stressful with some fear involved with any time that we would come together because I expected to be treated that way. So I was always worried deep down, like, what is she going to do this time? And they kept bullying me because I took it. I didn't have the guts, the voice, or even the personality to stop that from happening. They were intimidating to me too.
The big thing I remember is they finally had a big blow up at lunch, and one of the girls stood up and yelled and cried and screamed at the main girl doing all the bullying and told her off, which alerted some staff, and they were all pulled into the principal's office, and the social worker brought in and discussed it. And one by one, the girls started telling what had been happening and how these two girls were treating them, even though they were in the same friend group, sort of bullying within. So as one of them started sharing what had been happening to her, the other girls in the group went, you too, she's been doing that to me. And they never really compared stories or trusted each other and shared to know that it was happening to all of them. So then once they got together and realized that, it gave them all some strength. And this brought them all together and their backbones straightened up, and they decided to go after her and say no more.
At some point I did tell my parents once I realized how bad it was and how upset it got me.
She just took a little longer to tell us because I think they worry about what you're going to do about it, how you're going to react. I called school to say to the social worker and say, how's it going? What's going to happen? Kaylin's very nervous that at lunch the same old thing's going to happen. And they said, well, we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough people to watch. Do you know how many people and groups of bullying I have in this school? We can't keep track of all of them. We had our one meeting and that's the best we can do, which for us as parents was not a good enough answer, and left our kids hanging in the wings, which sure enough, the girl was right back at it.
It would have been nice if the school did more about the bullying and address it to the school in general, because if it's happening to one group of people, it's probably happening to another group of people in the school or even outside of school.
So then we talked to Kaylin about what your options were, and she had very fond memories of being at St. Mary's and kind of always wanted to go back, I think, wondering what would have been had she stayed there.
I think just the idea of a smaller school, we felt that the kids might have been tighter and closer, maybe welcoming of somebody new, and that the school itself could better focus on her needs.
So we decided to do a shadow day, and it was so warm and welcoming, and the kids were all friendly and kind and warm. And she just came home and said, I love it, I want to go there. And I said, well, how are the kids different? And she just said, they're like a bunch of cousins. They're all really close and they all laugh and know each other well, and there's just a warmth there. And so really, Kaylin made the decision at the ripe old age of 12 that she wanted to transfer, as hard as that would be for a quiet, shy girl to go to a new school.
With the decision to switch to a new school and make that big of a transition, a new start, I would say if there comes a time in your life where you have to do that, I would do what's best for you. If you're struggling, you should make that decision. That should be okay. I even had a friend at my old school that was saying, "How could you leave me? And what do you mean you're doing this? How could you do this to me?" And I just think if that person's really your best friend, you should want them to be happy. You should want them to do what's best for them, even if that means maybe separating from them.
I commend her at her age to knowing this is what was best for her, and she knew that. She's always had a very good gauge of that. So we supported her and we transferred her right away. And then she finished up her last 2.5 years there and, was quite happy at a much smaller, a little more nurturing school that had a little better pulse on the kids. They also have a lot less kids, so it's easier to know what's going on amongst them. And they keep better tabs on each other. The kids are very in tune to that's not how you treat another child, and they speak up when it happens. So I think she really enjoyed feeling that not only are there enough staff to be in tune to how people treat each other, but the kids are in tune to it and hold each other to a higher level of respect and treatment. So she was quite happy as far as that was concerned. I think to be aware, both as a parent and a child, that bullying can happen just as frequently, just as painfully within your friend group as it can to what you typically would think of when you think bullying, that one kid gets picked on by another kid and they're not friends, they don't even have a relationship.
You should be able to be yourself. You shouldn't have to change yourself or put on a different persona just for them. If they're not treating you well, then you can walk out on them. You can find new friends because there are plenty of people who are in the same boat. You don't need to be afraid to make that decision, because why sit there and do that to yourself when you can find plenty of good friends, real friends to be with.
I think as far as parents need to be aware of that, it was a hard lesson to see that parents sometimes aren't always on the same page as you would think they would be. You come together, and we did as parent groups then with this group of girls, and there's some parents that are going to think it's not my child. They would never do that, and it's a defensive denial, and that really didn't help anybody. As adults, I think you need to know any child's capable at any time for all different reasons.
Kids should definitely feel comfortable talking to their parents or an adult they trust if they are in a situation where they need help like that. For parents and possibly teachers, you should talk to your kids too, because it may not look like there's anything going on the outside. They could be holding it in, bottling it up inside them because they're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to talk to someone. I think it's important not to push them, but to let them know that you're there for them.
And it's even more difficult when they're quiet, and not to assume that everything is okay just because your child is not complaining or crying. What I remember is a noticeable difference when I went to the new school and had a new circle of friends, upbeat and happy. We wish that some of the other parents who were involved would have acted differently. But you can't make people think or do what you want them to do, and you can only control what you can control, which is unfortunate.
I think it takes a tremendous amount of courage and strength and learned wisdom to learn from the experiences, good and bad. I think this has given her such a resiliency and also some wisdom at a young age that friends can do this no matter what the age. And I point out that to her even as adults. People are people. It's not okay to treat people that way. And it's okay to demand that people treat you better, and when they don't, to say something.
I think it's important that if we can learn something from our problems and troubles and you can share them, there's a good chance that somebody else is going through that same thing. And it could be very helpful for kids, for their parents, and for teachers.
She learned to deal with it from her own perspective, learned from it, and then it gave her the desire to want to help other people, not go through the pain of it, and to learn from and share her experience and how she can help other people to understand it if it happens to them, which is Kaylin.